Tomorrow, the U.S. national soccer team takes the field against Belgium in the round of 16 in the World Cup. And along with many diehard Knicks fans, I'm still feeling the thrill of last month's NBA championship. And then there were those amazing Olympic gold medal wins of both women and men's U.S. hockey teams. I could go on, but to take a look at some of the big changes in college sports, including new rules allowing athletes to earn money and schools to directly share revenue, we spoke with the president of the NCAA, former Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, and asked him about those changes.
I think it's a good thing. Is it messy? Yes. Could it have been less messy? Maybe. But when you go through something like this on this kind of scale, where you're talking about $1 billion potentially going out to student athletes every year, it's going to be challenging. And as a result, it has been.
You're supportive of the bipartisan Protect College Sports Act because it establishes national standards on the name, image, and likeness program for student athletes because it limits player transfers and makes other changes that are designed to be equitable, at least in the legislation, across college athletics. But you know several of the largest athletic conferences take issue with this legislation. So as Washington continues debating it, why do you think it's necessary? Why do you think it's worth passing?
If you were to say to me, is the eligibility system that we currently have working? I mean, if everybody would comply with it and stay out of the courts, maybe, but they don't. There is no agent regulation, which is a huge problem. You talk to any student athlete about that and any school about it, they'll tell you that. This provides some regulatory structure around agents. It also deals with all the state preemption issues. What we're really trying to achieve is some sort of national framework so that you can have national championships and national competitions in which, for all intents and purposes, everybody's playing by the same set of rules. Now, I understand some of the concerns that the Big Ten and the SEC in particular have raised with the bill. We have some concerns with the bill too, but to simply walk away from something that deals with a number of the most significant challenges that face college sports at that point in time, in my view, would be a mistake.
By allowing the NIL and allowing schools to directly share revenue, you are seeing different Division I programs in other sports other than football and basketball, which are the biggest, get cut. Things like volleyball, track and field, a lot of the Olympic sports, and there's been a lot of concern about that. What does this legislation do? What's the NCAA doing to ensure that while all the money is going into football, basketball, lacrosse, maybe to some extent, volleyball, women's volleyball to some extent, but all those other sports, what are you doing to protect those and ensure that athletes who want to participate in those will still be able to do so?
The idea that sports are being cut only tells half the story, because at the same time certain sports may be being cut, other sports are being introduced. If you look at the number of kids who are playing sports right now in Division I, and you look at the number that are playing in Division II and Division III, they're basically at pretty close to all-time highs. No one ever writes about or talks about or promotes the sports that get added. They only talk about, which I understand, having come out of politics myself, about the sports that get cut. We track all this stuff every quarter with respect to adds and subtracts with regard to sports that are being made available and sports that are being reduced. But I think the idea that somehow there's a crisis here, I don't buy it, first of all. And secondly, I think the legislation does deal with this in a variety of ways. I happen to think there are better ways to deal with it, and it's an important issue, and we're going to continue to talk to folks in the Senate about that. But I think this notion that somehow paying or providing revenue sharing to kids in high revenue sports, of which frankly there's really only two, football and some basketball programs, people need to remember that football and men's basketball, for the most part, supports all the other programs that schools make available, especially in Division I. And that is not an insignificant issue when you think about this. I believe that at the end of the day, the best way to deal with it is treat the sports that generate significant amounts of revenue appropriately, right? And make sure there is this opportunity to share revenue.
In recent days, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to let states determine whether or not to allow transgender athletes to participate in sports. Last year, the NCAA changed its policy to align with the president's executive order threatening to revoke federal funding for schools that permitted transgender athletes. The NCAA changed its policy in part, saying it provides a clear national standard. In light of the High Court's ruling, do you foresee the NCAA having to tweak its transgender athletes policy?
I don't think so. I mean, generally speaking, we try to establish policies for most of our programs that can hopefully have a national standard to it. I had said to folks, Democrats and Republicans in Washington, after I got this job, that we needed some sort of clarity around what the national standard for this would be. And we adopted and comply with the standard that was put forth by the Trump administration. I think what happens at the state level is a different question. Although I do think our national standard is going to be what we expect our schools to use with respect to eligibility issues for college sports.
There are a lot of people who look at this and think, you know, I went to this university, it can't compete with some of these bigger ones. Are we essentially in an era now where only the biggest brands and the deepest pockets in college sports can expect to win basketball and football championships?
Well, I think football is a little different than some of the other sports. I think in football, given the scale of what it takes to create a competitive program, which was true even before the NIL era, that's probably a reasonable assumption. I think in most other sports, there's still plenty of room for competition. I mean, if you look at baseball, for example, Troy and Alabama made it to the College World Series. If you look at ice hockey, Denver won the national championship. There are plenty of sports where there's still a lot of competition. What's particularly interesting, I think, on the women's side is the scale and significance of how much success the major programs and the power conference schools have had in growing and winning in women's sports. The investments that they've made there have made an enormous difference in their ability to outcompete just about everybody else.
There are leaders at the Southeastern Conference, for example. I'm thinking of the head coach and the president of the University of Georgia, who've talked openly about the SEC breaking away from the NCAA if this legislation that's being considered isn't considered favorable to the conference. And once the TV contracts come up, why don't they just go their own separate way? What would you say to those in the SEC or other leagues that say, or conferences that say, yeah, let's just go out on our own?
Well, they'll have a hard time running national championships if they do that because everybody won't have the same rules. I actually like and respect a lot of the people at Georgia in particular, and at Ole Miss and at LSU and at a whole bunch of those schools who I deal with on a pretty regular basis. I think the possibility of trying to figure out some way to determine what really has to be a national standard to have national championships, and what you probably could do at a conference level, because it doesn't, necessarily affect our ability to run national championships on a level playing field, could be one way to think about it.